Hey, my name is Daryl Rouse, and yes, that does rhyme with house. Here's the question. Have you ever been in a listing appointment and it's going really well? In fact, you're getting little micro nods along the way. You know you've got this one. In fact, it's a beautiful feeling. And then just about when you're ready to ask for the business, you get an objection and you're like, oh, and you're so dejected. And as you're listening to the objection, you go, hang on, I know this one. I can handle this objection. And all of a sudden, they finish and bam, you handle it. And now you're feeling pretty darn good. And then they give you another objection. Or the objection you just handled is not the real objection. It was a kind of cover for the actual objection. And they clarify that back to you. And you're like, Well, it happened a lot to me, especially in my early years. So I developed a technique I call isolation, which ironically, we're in the middle of the coronavirus isolation right now. So the technique of isolation is designed, or was designed, to make sure the objection you're handling is the real objection, and to make sure that if there is another objection behind it, you find out what it is now, rather than playing that game where you handle the objection, they give you another one, you handle it, and they give you another one, and each one is a surprise. So let me roll back 30 years to when I was first in the business, and I am still in the business today, 33 or 34 years later, still actively selling real estate. This is back in my first week of real estate, and I'd been prospecting like crazy, and coming back from one of my appointments one day, and my broker's there and said, hey Daryl, how's it going? I go, pretty darn good. And he said, oh really? Well, what's going on? Have you got any listings? I go, nope. He goes, okay, have you got any sales? I go, nope. He goes, what's happening? And I said, well, Jim was his name. I said, Jim, every appointment I go on, they give me a reason not to move forward. And he said, what's some of the reasons? I said, well, they want to think about it. They're talking to other agents. They're not sure if they want to list with a big multinational franchise or a small boutique office. And one of them had a friend in the business. And then Jim explained to me that these objections were very common, and I needed to have a system where I learned all of the objections. And I had to be practiced in handling the objection. In other words, answering whatever they said that would stop me in my tracks. So from that point forward, I made a list of all the objections I could possibly get and all the answers. If I didn't know the answers, I'd go and ask other agents in our office, and I became pretty darn good at handling objections. In fact, I was so good at handling objections, in my first year of real estate, I sold one house. Not a typo. I worked my butt off. I would guarantee 70 hours a week and sold one house in my first year. Had lots of appointments, but I could never convert them because the objection would always stump me. So, and the one house I sold, by the way, was kind of by accident, but that's another story. So I really started to study and try to understand why was I getting objections. And I discovered there's 5 parts to an objection handling process. It wasn't just handling the objection, there were other parts. And one of those parts that I learned and understood and developed and coined a phrase for was isolation. So now let's talk about what isolation is and the scripts and the verbiage that we use. But don't get too caught up on the exact words. Just understand the context of what I'm saying, and then you can use your own words and you can adjust it for the situations. But it's simply this. Apart from state the objection back to them, is there any other reason why you wouldn't consider signing the contract to list your house with me tonight? Apart from the fact you want to have your parents look at the house first, is there any other reason why you wouldn't consider signing a contract to make an offer on the property today? So that's all it is. Apart from, aside from, state the objection back to them, and then ask them, is there any other reason why you wouldn't move forward? That's it. It's literally as simple as that. Now, before you actually use that isolation technique, and I know that's kind of back to front, it's kind of like, read the instructions, jump off a cliff, step number 1, step number 2, put on the parachute. So I know it's a bit back to front, but bear with me. An important technique, and this is, I would say in real estate, this is one of the 2 or 3 critical techniques that you have to understand as a salesperson. Before you actually isolate and handle the objection, you have to validate and acknowledge what the client says, whether they're a buyer or seller. If they give you an objection, you have to communicate to them 2 things. 1, you actually listened and heard it, and 2, you acknowledge it. In other words, you don't make them feel like an idiot because they brought up something like they have a friend in the business or they want their parents to see the house first. And so that technique is just a pause. It's a slight pause before you handle the objection. So you get the objection, hey, we're thinking about interviewing 2 other agents. Pause. I understand. That was my standard line. Pause. You don't say pause, Borat. You don't say pause, you pause, and then just say, I understand. Daryl, we're not sure if we want to sign a contract tonight because my parents need to see the house. I understand. Remember in Pulp Fiction, John Travolta's character at one point in time was asked by Uma Thurman, can't remember the name of her character, when somebody's talking, are you listening or are you waiting for your turn to talk? And I remember this scene clearly. He goes like this, he goes, I'm listening. Simple as that. When you get the objection, pause, probably just, I would say for a second, no longer. Pause, I understand. So you validate and acknowledge, and then you isolate. So it would go something like this. You're in a listing presentation, it's going well. You either ask them to sign the contract or you're getting close and they can sense that and they say something to the tune of, hey, Daryl, hey, slow down a little bit. Yeah, we have 2 other interviews that we're doing tonight, so we're not making any decisions today. Pause. I understand. Let me ask you a question, if I can. Apart from the fact you have a couple other interviews set up today, which I really do understand that, if I had been the only agent you were actually talking to, would you have considered moving forward with me tonight? Then you do the next technique. After you ask that question, you don't speak. Silence. So you ask the question of isolation. Is there any other reason why you wouldn't have chosen to move forward with me tonight? And then you allow space. You allow that space for the buyer or seller to fall into. I mean, I was told very early in my career, and I think it still holds up, the person that talks first in a selling situation loses. So the technique, you get the objection, pause, I understand. Apart from the fact you want to have your parents have a look at the house first, would there have been any other reason why you wouldn't have chosen to move forward and sign that contract and let me present that off tonight and possibly you could be a homeowner very soon? No, that's the only reason. Allow that space and time to answer. Yeah, that's critical. My wife and I were just recently, I'd say probably 3 months ago, looking at buying a new car, which we did, but I live in Australia now, so when you buy a new car in Australia, you've got to wait 3 months for it to come from overseas because that's just how it works here. So we're waiting at the moment. But we were in the salesperson's office and my wife and I had a chat beforehand and said, look, we're salespeople, we know how to negotiate. They're asking this for the house. They're asking this for the car. We won't pay above this. We're going to hold firm. We know what we're doing because we're sales agents. We've got 30-something years experience. We know what we're doing. That's a car salesman. We'll have it all over him. So this is a price we're willing to pay. He walks back in and he says, Kim, Daryl, here's the price we'd like to offer you for the car. Slightly under what we were willing to pay. And then he did this. Sat there and he did what I call a soft stare. So it wasn't like this, it was like one of those. He didn't say a word. And it was probably 4 seconds that passed, which felt like this. That's a long time for a salesperson to sit there and not talk. And then, like a lot of partners, husbands and wives do, I didn't know what to say. I'm sitting there thinking, oh no, what do we do now? He's under the price we said would pay. Oh my God, what do we do? So I turned to my wife and said, Kim, it's kind of up to you. And she looked at me like, oh, I cannot believe you just threw me under the bus. And then she says, well, it sounds good to me. And then we bought the car. Anyway, the point of that was the salesperson paused. He allowed a space after he'd asked the question for us to fall into. And that's a critical thing. I said earlier, there's probably 3 things in real estate that you really have to learn. One is the pause after an objection. The other one is leave space after a question is asked. After the isolation technique, is there anything else that may stop you from moving forward today or tonight? Leave that space. The buyer and seller will fall into it. Now, they may give you another objection. They may clarify the objection. They may, the objection may have been, well, Daryl, we're not sure if we want to go with a big multi-franchise, a big multinational franchise, or a smaller boutique office. I pause and acknowledge. I go, I understand. Apart from the fact you're tossing up between the big multinational or the smaller boutique office, would there be any other reason why you wouldn't consider moving forward and having me list your property and get started on selling it tonight? And then they say something like this, well, one of our friends is with Century 21. And you go, ugh. So the objection wasn't multinational or boutique, the objection was friend in the business. So now you've at least isolated the fact it's not the big multinational. You don't have to do the big objection handling technique for why my little boutique office is better than a multinational, or if you're with a multinational, why a multinational is better than a little boutique. That's not the objection. From isolation, you've flushed out the real objection is a friend in the business objection. So that's it. That's what it is, the isolation technique. But remember, this is one of 5 parts. Here's where isolation comes in, close to the end but not the end. Part number 1. Having a presentation to a buyer or seller that eliminates or minimizes most, if not all, objections. Number 2, categorizing the objection. Was it a programmed objection, a request for information, or a conditional objection? And where did it come up in the presentation? Then I want to acknowledge and validate the objection. Remember, pause. I understand. Then I want to isolate the objection. Then I want to handle it. So once you understand this system and put all the parts together, it kind of goes away from being this big emotional thing about objections to having a little bit of emotion there, but you overriding that with logic. And the client will really get a sense you do understand because you've paused at the right places, you've listened, and then you've asked a question and allowed them to fall into that space. Selling isn't telling. That's the old saying. Selling isn't telling. So that's it. Please go out, practice. Make sure you like and subscribe. Hit the little bell if you want to be notified every time I put up a video. And that's it for now. Oh, so what I've decided to do at the end of all my videos, I'm going to tell you a little story, something funny that happened to me in the business. So this is my dog story. All unedited, so one take. So here we go. I was out knocking on doors. I knocked on doors 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. That was my thing. Did that for 6 years, never had to do it again. So my thing back in the mid-80s was door knocking. So I was out door knocking one day. I'm walking down the street. And the area I used to sell a lot in was kind of lowest socio-economic level, if that's the right way to say it. Nice people, but a kind of poorer area. And I'm walking down the street and I see this pit bull charging towards me. And I am like, and I'm a dog person. I love dogs, and first thing you do when a dog's charging is don't run. So I am frozen in place. And this dog's charging towards me. I'm like, oh my God. And he looked like he was, 100 pounds of pure muscle. Looks like he'd been working out at the dog gym for a month. He's charging towards me. And I'm like, and then he comes up to me. He's wagging his tail. He's licking me. He wants to play. Friendliest dog I think I've ever met to this day. Scariest looking, but friendliest. So I'm like, oh, thank God, I'm not going to die today. Another good day. So then I keep door knocking. I walk up to a house, knock on the door. Hi, at the time I was Century 21. Hi, I'm Daryl from Century 21 Action. Have you thought about? And I didn't get through my sentence. The lady had opened the door and she slams the door. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then all of a sudden I realized that the dog that had been running at me like he was going to attack me was now following me around like a puppy. And he was sitting right behind me. And when this particular lady opened the door, this dog was there, it freaked her out, and she slammed the door shut. It took me, I would say, probably 10 or 15 minutes to get rid of this dog. To go home, boy, off you go, shoo away. But eventually I did. So, that's one of the fun things in real estate for me is I've got lots and lots and lots of funny things that happen, not only to me, but to my friends in the business. So, this is the first one, so after every video, the little Easter egg is going to be me telling a little story. So if you've hung around to the end, if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, please, after that story, like and subscribe. Thank you.